When my dad screamed that I was a disgrace for skipping my brother's engagement, I said nothing. Because if he knew what his perfect son had done to me, he'd never forgive himself. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Samantha Miller, but everyone calls me Sam. I'm 26 and live in a small apartment in Ohio. I've always been quiet, more focused on work than anything else. My family, on the other hand, has always been about appearance, how we looked, how people talked about us, and how much respect we earned. My dad, Richard Miller, made it clear from a young age that emotions didn't matter as much as reputation. He believed a strong family meant control, not love. My brother Ethan was his pride. He could do no wrong in my dad's eyes. Everything Ethan did, every mistake, every lie, was somehow turned into a story of how great he was. He was the golden child, and I learned early that nothing I did would ever measure up. I tried to stay out of trouble, do my job, and keep my distance from all the drama at home. When my mom called to say Ethan was getting engaged, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I wasn't angry, but I couldn't bring myself to celebrate. They were hosting a big family dinner for the engagement announcement. Everyone was supposed to show up, dress well, smile for pictures, and pretend our family was perfect. But I couldn't do it. Not this time. The night of the dinner, I stayed home. I didn't pick up the phone when my dad called. I didn't answer my mom's messages asking why I wasn't there. I just sat by the window, trying to calm the storm inside me. I knew what they'd say, that I was being selfish, dramatic, ungrateful. But I didn't care anymore. Later that night, my dad showed up at my apartment. His face was red with anger. He started shouting before I could even open my mouth. He said I embarrassed the family, that I ruined my brother's special day, that I was jealous of Ethan's success. He said if I didn't start acting like part of the family, he'd cut me off completely. I stood there, frozen, staring at him. He didn't even notice the tears forming in my eyes. He just kept yelling, like I was some stranger who had insulted him in public. I wanted to scream back, to tell him everything, but I couldn't. I knew he wouldn't believe me. He never had. So I said nothing. I just let him leave, slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was heavy, almost painful. But deep down, I knew it was time. Time for him to finally see who his perfect son really was, and what he had done to me. After my dad stormed out that night, things only got worse. He called me the next morning, his voice cold and sharp. He said I had embarrassed him in front of the whole family, and that people were already asking where I was. I stayed quiet, but he didn't stop. He reminded me how much he had done for me, paying for college, helping with rent when I lost my first job, and supporting me when things were tough. He said I owed it to him to show up and behave like a proper daughter. I wanted to tell him that his money didn't buy my peace, that I couldn't sit in a room pretending to be happy for someone who had destroyed my life. But the words stayed trapped inside me. I just said, "I'm sorry, Dad. I can't do this," and hung up. Mom called a few hours later. Her tone was softer, but it carried the same message. "You know how your father is," she said quietly. "He's just upset. Please don't make things worse. It's your brother's big moment. You'll regret missing it." I could tell she didn't understand, or maybe she did, but she was too afraid to go against Dad. Mom always chose peace over truth. When I refused again, she sighed deeply and said, "You're being selfish, Sam." That one word, selfish, hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just couldn't sit there pretending everything was fine. While I stayed home, the engagement dinner went exactly how I imagined. Ethan stood at the center of it all, charming and confident, playing the role of the perfect son. I later heard from a cousin that he gave a small speech thanking the family for their love and support. He even joked about me not being there, saying I probably had one of my moods again. Everyone laughed. That's what Ethan was good at, twisting things, turning my silence into something shameful. He had this way of making people believe he was the victim. If he said I was jealous or unstable, no one questioned it. Why would they? He was the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. By the end of the night, the story spreading around was that I didn't come because I couldn't handle seeing my brother happy. Some relatives even sent me messages saying I should apologize and make peace. I didn't respond. I just put my phone on silent and sat in the dark, thinking about how easily people believe lies when they come from someone they adore. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. Not because they talked behind my back, but because I realized I had no one left in my own family who saw me for who I really was. I was done fighting for space in a house that never wanted my truth. Still, deep down, I knew something had to change. Ethan's lies wouldn't stay hidden forever. And when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just shake him. It would break everything my father believed about his perfect family. 2 years ago, my life was completely different. Back then, I believed in love, in family, and in the idea that good things happen to good people. I was engaged to a man named Daniel Cooper. He wasn't perfect, but he made me laugh, and for a long time, I thought he truly loved me. We were planning to get married the following spring. I had picked out a dress, a small venue by the lake, and even started saving for our first home together. Life felt steady, simple, and safe. Then Ethan met him. It happened at a family gathering. Daniel came with me, excited to finally meet my family. My dad liked him immediately, and Ethan seemed friendly. Too friendly, now that I look back. He asked Daniel about his job, his hobbies, his life. He made him feel included, like part of the family. I remember thinking it was nice that my brother was finally showing some kindness. I couldn't have been more wrong. A few weeks later, Daniel started acting different. He became distant, distracted, and cold. He stopped calling as much, canceled plans, and always had some excuse. I thought it was stress from work, but something in my gut told me there was more. I tried to talk to him, but he'd just smile and say, "You're overthinking again, Sam." That became his favorite line. Then one night, while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed on the table. I don't know what pushed me to look, maybe instinct, maybe fear. But I picked it up and saw Ethan's name. My hands started shaking. The messages weren't innocent. They had been talking for weeks, maybe months. Some texts were about me, cruel jokes, things I'd said, moments they'd twisted into something to laugh at. Others were worse, flirtatious, personal, and unmistakably intimate. My heart stopped reading halfway through. I confronted Daniel when he came out of the shower. He froze, then tried to lie. When I showed him the messages, his face went pale. He didn't apologize. He just said, "You weren't supposed to see that." Like the problem wasn't what he did. It was that I found out. The next day, I called Ethan. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I demanded to know why. He didn't even try to deny it. He just laughed and said, "You always thought you were better than me. Now you know what losing feels like." His voice was calm, almost proud. I told my parents what happened, but they didn't believe me. Ethan told them I was making things up because I couldn't handle my relationship falling apart. Daniel backed him up. Ethan came to my apartment later that week. He stood in my doorway, smiling, and told me to drop it. "Dad will never believe you over me," he said quietly. "So just keep your mouth shut." Then he left. That was the night I realized my family's love was never meant for me, only for the version of me that stayed silent. When everything fell apart, I thought the truth would set things right. I believed that if I told my dad what really happened, he would finally see Ethan for who he was. So I went to him, shaking, crying, and desperate to be heard. I told him about Daniel, about the messages, about how Ethan had betrayed me in the worst possible way. But he didn't even let me finish. He just looked at me like I was losing my mind. He said I was overreacting, that I was jealous of Ethan's success and making up stories to get attention. The words cut deeper than anything Ethan had done. My mom stood there quietly, not meeting my eyes. She didn't defend me, didn't say a single word. It was like I was standing alone in a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. Ethan played his role perfectly. He showed up later that evening, calm and confident, and told our parents that I was just going through something. He said he loved me and wanted to help, but that I was unstable. He made me look like the problem, and he did it so smoothly that even I started doubting myself. After that, no one wanted to hear my side anymore. Every time I tried to talk about it, my dad would tell me to let it go or stop creating drama. It became easier to stay quiet than to keep fighting. So I packed my things, moved out of my parents' house, and decided to start over. Those first few months alone were hard. I cried almost every night. I worked long hours at a small design studio just to keep myself busy. The silence in my apartment felt heavy, but at least it was peaceful. I stopped answering Ethan's calls, stopped visiting home, and built a life that didn't depend on anyone. Slowly, the pain dulled. I learned how to live without them. For a long time, I tried to bury what happened. I didn't talk about it to anyone. I told myself it was in the past, that I had to move forward. But some wounds don't fade just because time passes. They sit quietly, waiting for something to bring them back to life. That moment came when I heard Ethan was getting engaged. My mom told me over the phone, her voice full of excitement. I froze. She said the girl's name was Lily, a kind, sweet woman from a good family. My chest tightened. I didn't know her, but I felt sorry for her instantly. She had no idea what kind of man she was about to marry. After the call, I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. Every memory, every lie, every moment of humiliation came rushing back like a storm. I thought I had healed, but I realized I had only been surviving. This time I couldn't stay quiet. I couldn't let Ethan ruin another innocent life. For the first time in years, I felt a strange sense of clarity. It wasn't anger, it was resolve. I knew what I had to do. A few days after hearing about Ethan's engagement, I met a mutual friend who knew Lily. She told me how kind and genuine Lily was, how excited she was to marry Ethan, and how she trusted him completely. Hearing that broke something inside me. I wanted to warn her, to tell her everything, but a part of me hesitated. Was I just being vengeful? Was it right to ruin someone else's happiness, even if it meant protecting her? I spent sleepless nights thinking about it. I replayed every memory with Ethan, every lie, every betrayal. I remembered how carefully he had manipulated everyone around him, including our parents, to hide the truth. I thought about Lily, innocent and unsuspecting, believing she was marrying the perfect man. I couldn't let her step into that trap. It took time, but I finally made my decision. I couldn't stay silent anymore. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, for me, for Daniel, and now for Lily. She deserved to know who she was really marrying, and Ethan needed to face the consequences of his actions. The next step was gathering proof. I started with my old phone, the one I had saved when I first discovered Ethan and Daniel. It had messages, screenshots, and voice notes that Ethan thought were long gone. Every message showed his manipulation, his lies, and the way he had betrayed not only me but everyone who trusted him. Some of the messages were cruel. Ethan laughing at my pain, planning how to cover his tracks, trying to make Daniel question his own feelings. Others were more subtle, showing how he twisted words and situations to make himself look innocent. I copied everything, making sure nothing could be deleted or ignored. For hours, I sat going through old files, piecing together the full story. I wanted to make sure when the truth came out, there would be no doubt. No one could claim it was my imagination or jealousy. Everything had to be clear, undeniable, and complete. At first, the thought of confronting Ethan terrified me. He had always been the one with control, the one everyone listened to. But now, I felt a quiet strength I hadn't felt before. I realized that the silence I had kept for so long had only protected him. Now, my voice would protect the truth. By the end of the week, I had everything ready. The screenshots, the messages, even the voice notes where Ethan had admitted things without realizing I had saved them. I felt a mix of fear and relief. Fear for what would happen when I finally revealed it, but relief knowing I was finally taking action. This was it. I wasn't doing it to hurt him. I was doing it to stop more lies, to stop more pain. And I knew deep down that once the truth came out, nothing in that family would ever be the same. The night of the engagement party arrived, and the Miller family had gone all out. The ballroom at the hotel was decorated with white flowers, golden lights, and tall candles. Guests in elegant dresses and suits filled the room, chatting and laughing. The air smelled of roses and expensive perfume. Music played softly, and the atmosphere was full of excitement. I stayed in my apartment, watching the clock tick closer to the start of the party. I knew my absence would make my father angry, but I also knew I had to wait for the right moment. I wasn't just showing up to the party. I was preparing to reveal the truth. As expected, my dad's anger grew quickly. By the time he realized I wasn't there, he started calling me repeatedly. When I didn't answer, he began sending furious texts. Later, I heard from a cousin who was at the party that he had made a scene in front of the guests, yelling that I had embarrassed the family, that I was selfish, and that if I didn't show up immediately, he would cut me off financially and remove me from his will. People nearby whispered to each other, surprised by his outburst. Meanwhile, Ethan played his part perfectly. He looked hurt, standing in the center of the room with a fake frown. He made a small speech about family, saying he was disappointed that I wasn't there to celebrate with him. Everyone believed him. He acted like the wronged brother, while I quietly planned my entrance. Minutes passed. The couple prepared to give their toast, smiling nervously at the gathered friends and relatives. I could imagine Lily standing there, excited and trusting, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. Then, right before Ethan raised his glass to speak, I walked through the doors. The moment I stepped in, the room went silent. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Guests turned to look. My father's face went from anger to shock. Ethan froze, unsure how to react. He could no longer control the room, and for the first time, I felt a small sense of power. I walked calmly across the ballroom, my eyes fixed on Lily, who looked at me with curiosity and a hint of confusion. My heart was racing, but my steps were steady. I could hear whispers spreading across the crowd as I passed. Some people stared at me in surprise, others in disbelief. When I reached the front, all attention was on me. The music faded, leaving only the sound of my shoes against the polished floor. I looked at Ethan, and for a moment, I saw the mask slip from his face. He wasn't the perfect son anymore. The perfect image he had built for years was about to crumble. I took a deep breath. This was the moment. Everything I had prepared, every message, every proof, every word I had kept hidden, was about to change their lives. And in that moment, I realized just how much strength it had taken me to get here. The silence in the room wasn't just because of me. It was because the truth was about to hit. I walked up to Lily slowly, keeping my voice low so only she could hear me. "Before you marry him, there's something you should see," I said, holding out my phone. She took it, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked it. I watched her face change with every screenshot she swiped through. Old messages between Ethan and Daniel, texts where he had lied, manipulated, and betrayed me. There were voice notes, too, where Ethan had admitted things he thought I would never hear again. For a moment, Lily froze. Her eyes widened and her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I could see her shaking. I had expected her to be shocked, but the disbelief in her eyes was sharper than I imagined. Around us, whispers started spreading through the crowd. People glanced at each other, confused, trying to understand what was happening. The elegant room felt smaller, heavy with tension, as if everyone could sense the truth before it was fully spoken. Ethan moved quickly, a panicked look crossing his face. He lunged toward Lily, trying to snatch the phone from her hands. "This is fake," he shouted. "You don't know what you're looking at. She's lying." His voice echoed through the room, but no one moved to help him. For the first time, his confidence faltered, and it was visible to everyone. Then Daniel stepped forward. He had come as a guest with a mutual friend, unaware of what would unfold. When he saw what was happening, he walked straight to the center of the room, calm but serious. "It's true," he said, his voice clear and firm. "Everything she's showing you is real. Ethan lied to everyone, to me, to her, and to his family." A murmur ran through the crowd, growing louder as people processed the words. Guests turned to look at Ethan, expecting some kind of explanation, but he couldn't speak. His mouth opened, then closed. He was frozen, the mask of the perfect son completely shattered. Lily looked up at him, her eyes full of pain and betrayal. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible, but it carried across the room. The question wasn't just for Ethan. It was for everyone who had been deceived, everyone who had believed in the perfect family image. I stood back quietly, letting the truth speak for itself. There was no gloating, no need to yell or accuse. The evidence did that on its own. Ethan's lies were out in the open for all to see, undeniable and clear. The room was tense and silent, filled with people who didn't know where to look or what to say. Some guests whispered to each other. Others stared at Ethan in shock. For the first time, he wasn't in control. For the first time, the person he had tried to destroy was standing strong, calm, and unshaken. And in that moment, I felt a strange sense of relief. The truth had finally come out. Not for revenge, but for justice. Everyone could see what kind of man Ethan really was, and nothing would ever hide it again. The room was silent, but the tension was thick enough to feel. My dad, Richard, stood frozen near the edge of the crowd. His eyes darted between Ethan, Lily, and me, but he couldn't speak. His perfect son, the golden boy he had praised for years, was exposed in front of hundreds of guests. The carefully built image of Ethan as flawless, charming, and trustworthy had crumbled in minutes. Lily's parents were beside her, demanding answers. Their voices were calm but sharp, carrying authority. "How could you lie to us?" Lily's mother asked. "What kind of man does this?" Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He looked smaller than he had ever looked, like a child caught in a lie he couldn't fix. Around us, the guests murmured, some whispering questions, others staring in shock. I could see the confusion and disbelief on their faces. Every glance Ethan had relied on to charm people now worked against him. His reputation, built over years of manipulation and lies, collapsed completely. My mother, Janet, stood to the side, quietly crying. Her shoulders shook as she tried to hide her shame. I had never seen her like this. Usually, she chose peace and appearances over truth. But now even she couldn't ignore what had happened. Richard finally turned toward me, his expression unreadable. He looked like a man realizing he had been blind for years. Slowly, he opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Then his eyes softened, a flicker of understanding and regret crossing his face. He had punished me, blamed me, and ignored my truth, all while protecting the son who had hurt me the most. I looked at him, my heart steady. I didn't smile, I didn't gloat. I simply said, "I tried to tell you. You chose your pride over me." My voice was calm, but firm. Every word carried the weight of the years I had suffered silently, the nights I had cried, and the times I had been ignored. Then I turned and walked away. My steps echoed softly against the polished floor, but the sound seemed loud in the stunned silence of the room. Heads turned, eyes widened, whispers spreading as people processed what had just happened. Ethan's jaw was tight, his anger and shock battling behind his frozen expression. Richard's face was pale, a mix of guilt and disbelief. My mother's tears continued to fall, silent and heavy. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I had said what needed to be said. I had shown the truth, exposed the lies, and finally freed myself from the family that had ignored me for so long. The room remained in stunned silence, filled with the echoes of what had happened. And as I walked out, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief, clarity, and the quiet strength of finally standing for myself. Weeks after the engagement party, life began to change in ways I had expected, but never fully imagined. Ethan's reputation had collapsed completely. Within days, he was asked to step down from his position at the family business. The scandal had spread so quickly that clients and partners no longer trusted him. He tried to explain, to defend himself, but no one listened. The son who had always been untouchable was suddenly powerless, facing the consequences of his actions. Lily called me a few days later. Her voice was soft, but I could hear relief and gratitude in every word. She told me she had ended the engagement, and that she wanted to thank me for opening her eyes before it was too late. She said I had saved her from a lifetime of lies and heartbreak. I didn't respond immediately. I just listened, letting her words sink in. It felt strange to be thanked for something I had carried silently for so long, but it also felt right. My father tried to reach out after a week or two. Richard called and sent messages, apologizing for how he had treated me all those years. He admitted that he had been blind, that he had punished the wrong child, and that he now understood what had really happened. But I didn't answer. I didn't feel ready to forgive him yet, and I didn't want to fall back into the family dynamic that had caused me so much pain. I needed distance, space to heal, and the freedom to make my own choices. I started therapy soon after. Talking to someone who didn't judge me, who listened carefully and helped me untangle years of hurt, was harder than I expected. But it was necessary. I worked on rebuilding my confidence, learning to trust myself, and forgiving myself for staying silent when I had been hurt. Every session gave me a little more strength, a little more clarity, and a sense that I was finally moving forward. After months of planning and saving, I moved to a new city. The change was more than physical. It was a fresh start. I rented a small apartment, decorated it the way I wanted, and started a creative business that allowed me to use my skills and passions. I built it from the ground up, knowing that every decision, every step, was mine alone. I didn't answer calls from the old circle of family friends or distant relatives. I was free from the shadow of my family, free from their judgment, and free to live my life on my own terms. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm and pride. I had faced the lies, revealed the truth, and now I was building a life that belonged entirely to me. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. Months had passed since everything had fallen apart, and I often found myself on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sun sink slowly below the horizon. The sky turned shades of orange and pink, and the world felt quiet, almost peaceful. From up here, I could see the city moving below, full of life and energy, and I felt like I had finally found a place where I belonged. I thought a lot about the past, about my family, my brother, and the years I had stayed silent. I realized that silence, while comfortable, had only protected the guilty. It had allowed lies to grow, betrayals to continue, and the people who hurt me to remain untouchable. Speaking up had cost me everything I thought I had. the support of my family, the warmth of my home, and even my sense of safety. But in that cost, I had gained something far more valuable: peace, clarity, and control over my own life. I remembered the engagement party, the faces of the guests, my father's shock, Ethan's panic, and Lily's relief. I remembered the feeling of walking away from the room and knowing I had done the right thing. Even though it had been terrifying to confront the truth, I had realized that letting it remain hidden would have been far worse. I thought about forgiveness too. I forgave my brother in the sense that I no longer carried the anger that weighed me down. But I didn't forget. I would never forget what he did, what my father ignored, and how much I had suffered in silence. Forgetting would have been betrayal to myself. Remembering allowed me to stay strong, to be cautious, and to value the life I was building on my own terms. As I sat there, the warm evening air brushing against my face, I whispered the words I had kept inside for so long. I didn't destroy my brother. He did that himself. I just stopped protecting him from the truth. It felt good to say it, to own it, and to know it was true. I hadn't needed revenge, and I hadn't needed to prove myself to anyone. The truth had done all of that on its own. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from my family's expectations, free from the lies, and free from the fear of being silenced again. I had built my own life, my own happiness, and my own peace. The pain that had once seemed endless now felt like a distant shadow. I stood there for a long time, watching the city lights come on, feeling the quiet strength inside me. I was stronger, calmer, and at peace. I had survived betrayal, uncovered the truth, and walked away from the past. And finally, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be.